Ask anyone what damages lung health, and you'll hear one answer: smoking. That answer isn't wrong, but it's incomplete in a way almost nobody talks about. One Korean study followed nearly 1,500 adults with healthy lungs for 5 years. Every 10% drop in daily fiber intake more than doubled the risk of new airflow limitation. Not a small effect. A statistically strong one published with a p-value of 0.001. Here's the detail behind that number. Your gut bacteria produce compounds that travel to your lungs and directly shape how much inflammation happens there. Every single day. Whether or not you've ever smoked a cigarette in your life. 5 foods. Documented in real research. One tracking over 100,000 people. Each one shown to support that gut-lung connection. That's what this video is about. None of this requires a diagnosis to matter. Whether your lungs feel fine right now or already give you trouble on stairs, this pathway is running either way. Here's what most people believe about lung health. Don't smoke. Avoid pollution. Exercise when you can. That's the whole conversation most of the time. None of that advice is wrong. Smoking remains the single largest driver of lung damage. Pollution and inactivity matter too. But this advice treats your lungs like a filter exposed only to outside air. It says nothing about a second pathway running from the inside that shapes lung inflammation just as directly. Here's what that advice leaves out. Your lungs contain immune cells that are constantly deciding how to respond to everything they encounter. Irritants, allergens, infections. That decision isn't made in isolation. It's shaped by chemical signals arriving from your gut. This matters even if you've never smoked. Lung function declines gradually with age in everyone. Some of that decline is unavoidable. Some of it isn't. Here's the number from the opening, worth sitting with again. A 10% drop in fiber intake linked to more than double the risk of new airflow limitation. That's not a subtle trend. That's a strong, measurable relationship, tracked over real time in real people. Adults who started the study with completely healthy lungs. Airflow limitation in that study wasn't a vague symptom. It was measured directly with spirometry, the same breathing test used in any pulmonary function exam. The comparison wasn't hypothetical either. Same people, same lungs, tracked before and after a real change in what they ate. This isn't only about smokers trying to undo damage. People who have never smoked still show measurably better lung function with higher fiber intake. In one large analysis, the highest fiber intake group had meaningfully higher lung capacity than the lowest group. Across thousands of adults, doctors focus heavily on smoking cessation for good reason. It remains the highest leverage single change available. But once that conversation ends, almost nothing gets said about the second lever sitting quietly in every meal. Your gut bacteria can either calm your lungs' immune response or provoke it. The deciding factor sits on your plate. This matters specifically after 50. Lung function peaks in your 20s and declines gradually from there, regardless of smoking history. Standard checkups rarely mention diet as part of that decline. Spirometry measures the outcome. It says nothing about what's driving it. Here's the part that changes the entire conversation. This isn't about replacing smoking cessation or pollution avoidance. It's about a parallel pathway running through your gut bacteria that most conversations about lung health skip entirely. Certain foods feed that pathway directly. Others support it through a completely different mechanism. Both change what your immune system does inside your chest every day. There's a second layer to this gap worth naming. Even people who already eat reasonably well often aren't thinking about lungs specifically when they choose food. Fiber gets framed as a digestion habit or a heart health habit, rarely a lung habit. That framing gap isn't anyone's fault. It's simply what happens when the research connecting diet to breathing sits in respiratory journals. Most people, including most primary care doctors, never have time to read them in full. A pulmonary function test measures airflow at a single moment. It says nothing about the meals from the week before or the year before. Those are what shaped how your immune cells were already behaving when you walked in. That's not a criticism of the test. It's simply a limit of what any single measurement can capture. The question worth sitting with is simple. Which foods actually support that pathway, and how well documented is the evidence behind each one? Your lungs don't produce meaningful amounts of the compounds that calm their own inflammation. That surprises most people. The lung's own microbial population is small, low in mass, not built for heavy metabolic work. The signals shaping lung immune behavior mostly arrive from somewhere else. Your gut. Here's the mechanism. Fiber your body can't digest reaches your large intestine. Gut bacteria ferment it there, producing short-chain fatty acids, acetate, propionate, and butyrate. The same compounds already discussed on this channel in the context of your pancreas and kidneys. Those compounds enter your bloodstream and travel throughout your body, including to your lungs. There they bind to two specific receptors, FFAR2 and FFAR3. FFAR2 has another name worth recognizing, GPR43, the exact same receptor already explained in the pancreas video. There, short-chain fatty acids bind to it on cells lining your intestine, triggering GLP-1 release. Here, that same receptor does different work entirely. On immune cells in your lungs, FFAR2 activation helps regulate what researchers call lung immune tone. It promotes the development of regulatory T cells, a type of immune cell that calms inflammatory responses rather than triggering them. It reduces production of IL-1 beta, an inflammatory signaling molecule linked to airway damage. It also strengthens the barrier formed by cells lining your airways. This is a genuinely unusual detail. One receptor. Two organs, already covered on this channel. Two completely different downstream effects, both trace back to the same short-chain fatty acids made by the same gut bacteria. Multiple recent studies describe this as establishing your lungs' baseline immune readiness, not a response to a specific infection or irritant. More an underlying tone shaping how your lungs react when something arrives. Well-fed gut bacteria, producing steady short-chain fatty acids, appear to keep that tone calmer. Poorly fed gut bacteria appear to leave lungs more reactive, more prone to excess inflammation when challenged. It's worth being precise about the evidence base here. The receptor mechanism, FFAR2 and FFAR3 activation by short-chain fatty acids, is well established at the cellular level, confirmed in both animal and human tissue studies. Large human studies connecting whole food intake to lung outcomes are mostly observational. They track real populations over real years rather than short controlled trials. That's an important distinction, and this video stays honest about it food by food. There's a second pathway worth understanding before the 5 foods themselves. Not every food here works through fiber fermentation alone. Some compounds, particularly certain plant polyphenols, appear to act more directly on immune signaling in lung tissue, independent of gut fermentation. 2 related but distinct mechanisms, both converging on the same outcome: calmer lung inflammation. There's a timing detail worth understanding too. Short-chain fatty acids don't accumulate slowly over months. Gut bacteria respond to fiber intake within days, shifting production of these compounds fairly quickly. That doesn't mean lung benefits show up overnight. It means the underlying input, the fuel reaching your gut bacteria, changes fast. Much faster than the disease processes it's protecting against. One more thing worth naming before moving forward. This mechanism doesn't require pre-existing lung disease to matter. Lung immune tone runs in everyone, all the time, quietly shaping how each breath gets handled. The 5 foods ahead aren't rescue foods for damaged lungs. They're inputs into a system that's already active, whether or not you've ever thought about it before today. That's exactly what the next 5 foods have in common. Each supports this gut-lung pathway through fiber fermentation, direct polyphenol activity, or both. Each has real research behind it, even where that research looks different from a single clean clinical trial. Food 1. Apples. Apples are dense in flavonoids, a class of plant compounds already linked to reduced inflammation throughout the body. In lung research specifically, apples carry a distinct research history stretching back decades. A large cohort study following men in Sweden found something specific. Those eating more than 1 apple daily had 30% lower risk of developing COPD compared to those eating fewer. A separate, much larger analysis, the UK Biobank study, followed over 119,000 adults. Median age, 60. Higher apple intake, specifically more than 2 servings daily, was associated with lower COPD risk and better measured lung function. Higher FEV1, higher FVC. Better airflow ratios. It's worth being precise about what kind of evidence this is. These are large observational cohorts, not short controlled trials giving people apples and measuring lung function afterward. The relationship is consistent, repeated across different populations and different research teams, which strengthens confidence. But it remains an association, not direct proof that apples alone cause the lower risk. The leading explanation involves quercetin, a flavonoid especially concentrated in apple skin. Quercetin appears to act on inflammatory pathways in lung tissue somewhat independently of the fiber fermentation mechanism described earlier. 2 separate roads reaching a similar destination. One practical detail matters here. Most of an apple's flavonoid content sits in and just beneath the skin. Peeling an apple removes a meaningful share of exactly what this research is about. Variety matters less than people expect. Red, green, or yellow apples all carry meaningful flavonoid content, though darker skinned varieties tend to run slightly higher. What matters far more than color is simply eating the peel. An apple eaten whole, unpeeled, delivers a meaningfully different dose than the same apple peeled first. Washing, rather than peeling, preserves this dose while still removing surface residue. A firm scrub under running water accomplishes that without sacrificing the skin. Cooking doesn't destroy quercetin entirely either, though raw apples retain somewhat more than baked ones. Food. 2. Berries. Berries showed up in the same large UK Biobank analysis as apples through the same flavonoid mechanism. Participants eating more than 1 serving of berries daily had lower COPD risk and better lung function measurements, consistent with the apple findings in the same study population. Berries carry a different flavonoid profile than apples. Anthocyanins, the compounds giving blueberries and blackberries their deep color, are especially concentrated here. Like quercetin, anthocyanins appear to influence inflammatory signaling in lung tissue directly. alongside whatever effect they have through gut fermentation of their fiber content. This channel has discussed berries before in the pancreas video through a fiber and polyphenol mechanism benefiting insulin signaling. Here, a related but distinct set of compounds from the same food appears to benefit a completely different organ. One more example of the same pattern building across this channel. Ordinary foods, multiple mechanisms, several organs, all connected through the same handful of upstream pathways. Frozen berries preserve this flavonoid content well, since freezing happens shortly after harvest. That makes berries a realistic year-round addition, not dependent on a short growing season. Darker berries tend to carry more anthocyanins than lighter ones. Blackberries and blueberries generally outpace strawberries on this specific measure, though strawberries still contribute meaningfully to overall flavonoid intake. Mixing varieties across a week is a simple way to broaden exposure, rather than relying on just one type. Food 3. Green tea. Green tea appeared in the same UK Biobank analysis already discussed. Moderate tea consumption, 1 to 2 servings daily, was associated with lower COPD risk among the same 100,000+ adults. Beyond that observational data, green tea has something the previous 2 foods don't: a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial, testing it directly. 109 healthy adults were split into 2 groups. One drank a beverage containing 490 milligrams of catechins, the main active compound in green tea. The other drank a placebo, with none. Over the following weeks, the catechin group experienced significantly shorter duration of runny nose, nasal congestion, and headache compared to placebo. It's worth being precise about what that trial measured: upper respiratory infection symptoms, not COPD or long-term lung function directly. It's a different outcome than the cohort data on apples and berries testing a more immediate, shorter-term effect. Together, the 2 types of evidence point in a consistent direction. Cohort data on long-term lung health, a controlled trial on infection symptoms. Related, but not the exact same claim. Catechins appear to work partly through direct immune modulation, and partly by shaping which bacteria thrive in your gut, feeding back into the same fermentation pathway described earlier. 2 mechanisms. 1 familiar pattern. Brewing temperature affects catechin content meaningfully. Water just off the boil, rather than fully boiling, preserves more of these compounds. Very hot water can degrade some of the more delicate catechin structures. Bottled and canned green tea beverages typically undergo heat sterilization during manufacturing. That process alters some catechin structures compared to freshly brewed tea. That doesn't erase their benefit entirely, but freshly brewed tea, steeped a few minutes rather than seconds, remains the more concentrated option. Decaffeinated green tea retains most of its catechin content, useful for anyone avoiding caffeine later in the day without giving up this benefit. Food 4. Oats. Oats return to this channel for a 3rd time, and the reason is structural, not repetitive for its own sake. Beta-glucan, the soluble fiber already discussed for the pancreas and kidneys, is exactly the fermentable fiber this video is about. It feeds the FFAR2 and FFAR3 pathway directly. The lung-specific evidence here comes from large population data rather than a single trial. The NHANES analysis tracked thousands of American adults. People in the highest quartile of fiber intake had FEV1 measurements 82 milliliters higher than the lowest quartile. FVC measured 129 milliliters higher. A separate Korean cohort, distinct from the one opening this video, followed 1,745 adults over 5 years. Higher fiber intake was associated with meaningfully lower risk of developing COPD itself, not just an isolated symptom. Oats aren't the only fiber source in that population data, but they're one of the most concentrated, most consistently available ones. A single bowl delivers a meaningful share of daily fermentable fiber in one sitting. This is the same fiber already covered in detail in the pancreas video, including preparation notes on steel-cut versus instant oats. Those same preparation details apply here. What's different is the destination. The same fermentation byproducts reaching your pancreas and kidneys are, at the same time, reaching your lungs. That repetition is worth sitting with directly. A single bowl of oats, unchanged in any way, does 3 things at once. Supports insulin efficiency, reduces gut-made toxins reaching the kidneys, calms lung immune tone. Not 3 separate benefits requiring 3 separate foods. 1 food, 1 mechanism, 3 organs, all running from the same breakfast. Food 5. Fermented yogurt. Fermented yogurt closes this list with the most directly relevant clinical trial of the 5 foods, run in a population close to this channel's own audience. 205 adults, all 45 years or older, were split into 2 groups. One group drank 300 milliliters daily of yogurt containing a specific probiotic strain, Lactobacillus paracasei N1115, for 12 weeks. The other group continued their normal diet with no added probiotic. Researchers tracked upper respiratory infections directly. The results were clear. Significantly fewer people in the probiotic group were diagnosed with an infection during the study period. The total number of infection events was significantly lower as well. Researchers also tracked immune markers, including T-cell populations, as a secondary measure alongside the primary infection outcome. It's worth naming something honestly here. Not every probiotic strain tested in similar research produced significant results. Several trials using different strains found no meaningful difference from placebo. Strain specificity appears to matter considerably in this particular area of research, more than in some of the other mechanisms discussed on this channel. This trial's specific strain, Lactobacillus paracasei N1115, showed a real effect. That doesn't guarantee every yogurt on a grocery shelf delivers the identical result. What it does support is the broader pattern. Live, active cultures reaching your gut appear to shift immune signaling well beyond your digestive tract, reaching your respiratory system directly. This channel has now covered 3 separate probiotic mechanisms across 3 videos. Different strains, different organs, the same underlying principle. What lives in your gut doesn't behave like a local resident. It behaves like a messenger with access to your entire body. This channel discussed fermented dairy before in the kidney video through a broader live culture mechanism, rather than one named strain. The through line remains the same. What reaches your gut doesn't stay in your gut. A daily serving of yogurt with live cultures on the label is a realistic, low-effort way to add this bacteria. The same guidance already covered in the kidney video applies here too. Heat-treated or pasteurized after culturing products often list bacteria on the label without any of it surviving in a functional state. Looking specifically for the words live and active cultures remains the reliable check, even without matching the exact strain used in this trial. Timing this daily habit around a season worth naming matters too. Upper respiratory infections cluster heavily in colder months when people spend more time indoors in closer contact with each other. Building a daily yogurt habit before that season starts matches how the trial itself was structured. Not reaching for it, only after symptoms appear. 12 consistent weeks, not an occasional bowl reached for during an active cold. Here's the detail worth sitting with. Across all 5 of these foods, none of them alone prevents lung disease or reverses existing damage. That's true of every food covered on this channel so far, across every organ. It's also exactly why 5 separate foods add up to more than any single one could on its own. Each works through a slightly different angle. What the research actually shows is narrower and still meaningful. 5 separate ordinary foods, each connected through real evidence to a pathway that shapes lung inflammation from the inside. Stacked across a week, that's not 5 isolated effects. That's one consistent input into a system running in the background of every breath you take. There's a reason this channel keeps returning to the same underlying idea. Video after video, regardless of which organ that week's title mentions. This connects directly to territory already covered here. The pancreas video discussed how fiber fermentation triggers GLP-1 release through the GPR43 receptor. This video discussed the exact same receptor, known here as FFAR2, doing entirely different work in your lungs. Not a similar mechanism. The same molecular receptor, the same short-chain fatty acids, reaching a second organ and producing a second, unrelated benefit. It's worth being precise about what 5 foods can and can't claim. None of these prevent lung disease outright, or reverse existing damage from decades of smoking or pollution exposure. This video isn't suggesting they should. What the evidence supports is narrower. Specific foods, connected through real research, to a pathway that shapes lung inflammation continuously in ways separate from smoking status. It's also worth naming what kind of evidence this video leaned on. 2 of the 5 foods, apples and berries, rest on large observational cohorts rather than controlled trials. That's genuinely different from a randomized trial. This video says so directly, food by food, rather than blurring the distinction. Green tea and fermented yogurt each have real controlled trials behind them, though testing infection symptoms rather than long-term lung function directly. Oats rest on large population data connecting general fiber intake to measured lung function. None of these 5 pieces of evidence are identical in strength or type. Presenting them as identical would be dishonest. Presenting the differences clearly is what lets you weigh them accurately. It's also worth being honest about who this matters most for. Someone managing diagnosed COPD or severe asthma shouldn't treat 5 foods as a replacement. Not for prescribed inhalers, medication, or pulmonary care. This mechanism is a background input, not a treatment. For someone with healthy lungs or a smoking history adding a second lever, this evidence carries real practical weight. There's also a fair question about why gut-lung research trails gut-pancreas or gut-kidney research so noticeably. Part of the answer is simply timing. The receptor mechanism connecting short-chain fatty acids to lung immunity was only mapped in real detail recently. Some of the clearest work published within the last 12 months. This isn't old, settled science being ignored. It's genuinely recent science that hasn't reached most conversations yet. That timing detail matters for how this video should be read. This isn't a 100-year-old finding somehow overlooked. It's closer to the leading edge of a research area still actively expanding. That's exactly why staying honest about cohort data versus controlled trials matters so much here. Consider how this fits into the larger pattern this channel keeps building. GPR43 and GLP-1 in the pancreas. Gut-made toxins reaching the kidneys. Now the same receptor family shaping lung immune tone. Different organs, overlapping mechanisms. One shared thread running underneath every single one of them. That thread isn't a coincidence. and it isn't limited to these examples. It's the same reason this channel keeps returning to the gut, one organ system at a time. There's a broader implication worth sitting with. Beyond any single organ, one receptor, fed by the same handful of gut bacteria, genuinely influences the pancreas, the kidneys, and the lungs. The old model of treating each organ as its own separate system starts to look incomplete. Not wrong, exactly. Just missing the wiring connecting all three. If this breakdown gave you 5 specific foods and a mechanism to understand, follow this channel. New videos connecting research exactly like this arrive every few days. There's one more piece of this worth returning to before this closes. Go back to where this video started. A 10% drop in fiber intake linked to more than double the risk of new airflow limitation. In adults who started with completely healthy lungs. A statistically strong effect, hiding in plain sight in a conversation almost entirely focused on smoking instead. You now know 5 specific ways to support the other one. Apples, delivering quercetin concentrated just beneath the skin. Berries, adding anthocyanins through a related but distinct pathway. Green tea, backed by both population data and a direct controlled trial on infection symptoms. Oats, feeding the exact fermentation pathway behind everything explained in this video. Fermented yogurt, tested directly in adults, matching this channel's own audience, cutting respiratory infections in a real trial. None of this replaces smoking cessation, pollution avoidance, or care from a doctor if you're managing diagnosed lung disease. If anything, it gives you a second parallel lever most conversations never mention at all. 5 ordinary foods, each carrying real evidence. Not a single vague instruction to breathe cleaner air and hope for the best. There's something worth sitting with here, beyond the 5 foods themselves. For years, lung health got reduced to a short list of things to avoid. Smoking, pollution. This video was never about replacing that list. It was about adding what almost never appears on it. A pathway running from your gut to your lungs, active every single day, regardless of what's in the air around you. None of these 5 foods require anything unusual. Apples, berries, oats, and tea sit on ordinary grocery shelves. Yogurt with live cultures takes one extra look at a label. The barrier here was never access. It was simply not knowing which foods actually mattered and why. You don't need all 5 at once, either. Starting with one is enough. The one that fits most naturally into a day you're already living. Tea already replaces a coffee some afternoons. An apple already works as a snack. Small, repeatable choices, not a complete overhaul of how you eat starting tomorrow. That word, repeatable, matters more than any single number in this video. This mechanism doesn't reward one impressive week of eating, followed by a month of forgetting about it. It responds to consistency, meal after meal. The same quiet way it's been shaping your lungs your entire life, whether or not anyone ever explained it before today. A realistic week might look like this. Tea most afternoons instead of a second coffee. An apple, unpeeled, as a snack a few times a week. Oats at breakfast, already a habit from earlier videos on this channel. Berries added wherever they fit, fresh or frozen. Yogurt with live cultures, once a day, building toward that 12-week window the research actually tested. None of that requires a meal plan. It requires noticing what's already within reach. If today's explanation gave you something more useful than the usual advice ever did, follow this channel. New videos breaking down research exactly like this arrive every few days. Send this to someone managing COPD, asthma, or simply trying to protect their lungs as they get older. Someone who has never heard their gut connected to their own breathing. This directly. Leave a comment with the one food from this list you're most likely to actually add this week. There's a good chance the research has more to say about it than you'd expect. Think back to how this video opened. One factor: smoking, carrying almost all of the attention. A second factor: fiber, more than doubling risk with just a 10% drop, carrying almost none of it. What's changed now isn't the biology itself. It was running exactly the same way before this video and after it. What's changed is what you have now: a name for the second pathway, 5 specific ways to support it, and the actual research behind each one. Your lungs were never only responding to the air around you. They were listening to your gut the entire time. This video is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for medical advice. Always consult a healthcare professional.